Do you believe Carl Jung is a thinker of the past? A dusty name in a psychology textbook? What if I told you that, at this very moment, the map he drew of the human psyche is being used to shape every decision you make? The movie that made you cry over the weekend, the advertisement that made you want something you didn't even know you desired, the political leader who makes you feel anger or hope. All of them are, consciously or unconsciously, pulling the strings of the archetypes that Jung revealed. Jung's legacy is not an academic theory. It is the invisible architecture of your reality. He is not history. He is the now. And today, we are going to pull back the veil. What we are about to do on this journey is not comfortable. We are going to illuminate the cellars of the collective psyche. If you have the courage to see the matrix behind the modern world, if you seek not just information, but deep understanding, then this channel is your refuge. Subscribe now, but only subscribe if you are ready to question. Activate the bell, because every video here is a thread we connect, and to miss one is to miss part of the map. Click like not for me, but as an act of recognition, a sign that you are ready to begin your own journey toward the self. And most importantly, leave your comment. Use the space below as your public journal. Answer this: which of Jung's ideas haunts or fascinates you the most? Your comment is the first step of your conscious journey. Why now? Why, in an age of instant data, artificial intelligence, and global connectivity, does the voice of a Swiss doctor born in the 19th century echo louder than ever? The answer is painfully simple: because we are sick. Ours is a sickness of the soul. We live in the age of information, and yet we are starving for meaning. Jung was not just a psychologist. He was a prophet of our age. He diagnosed the malaise of modern man, a lethal disconnection from his own roots, from his own unconscious. Where we see anxiety, depression, and existential emptiness, Jung saw the symptoms of a neglected soul, screaming for attention in a world obsessed with the external. He saw the danger of a humanity that had gained the world but lost itself, a humanity that could fly to the moon but was afraid to look into its own heart. This distant echo is not a relic of the past. It is the sound of our own future calling us back. We are living in a desert of the real, as later philosophers would call it. A feast of digital phantoms where the persona, the social mask we wear, has become our only face. The inflated ego, celebrated by the culture of appearances, is starved and fragile, for it feeds on external validation, ignoring the vast ocean of the self that exists beneath the surface. Jung's legacy begins here, not as an answer, but as the most urgent question: who are you? When no one is looking. He forces us to face the paradox that the more we superficially connect with thousands, the more we deeply disconnect from one ourselves. Technology promised us we would be gods, but we have become mere avatars. The noise of the world outside, the incessant flow of notifications, opinions, and crises, is the perfect distraction tactic so that we never have to face the terrifying and revealing silence of our inner world. Jung offers us not an escape, but a compass that points not to success, fame, or wealth, but to wholeness. And this journey, he warned us, is not for the faint of heart. It demands that we stop running from what we fear most, our own depth. His legacy is the legacy of courage, the courage to turn off the external noise to, finally, listen to the inner whisper of the psyche, which patiently waits to tell us who we really are and why we are here. This is not a video about psychology. It is a rescue map. The relevance of Jung today lies not in his theories being taught in universities, but in their practical application as the only viable antidote to the quiet desperation that defines modern life. He gave us the tools to descend into our own personal abyss, not to be lost in it, but to find the gold that only exists in the darkness. His legacy is the promise that, at the bottom of the well of our individual despair, we find not annihilation, but the collective unconscious, the source of all creativity, all meaning, and all healing. Before Freud, the mind was a mechanism to be fixed. With Jung, it became a universe to be explored. And that exploration, today, is no longer an option. It is a matter of psychological survival. We are all of us, now, standing at the edge of the cliff of our own minds. And Jung's work is the lighthouse that invites us to dive, assuring us that, however dark the water may seem, it is the source of life. The journey we begin now is the rediscovery of that ocean. The relevance of his ideas is not just influence, it is the very foundation upon which any attempt to build a meaningful life in the 21st century must be based. The world has broken its promise of external happiness. Jung offers us the only promise that can be kept, that of internal wholeness. The history of depth psychology is marked by a schism, a rupture as profound as a continent splitting in two. On one side, Sigmund Freud, the father, the master who mapped the basement of the individual psyche, the personal unconscious. For Freud, this basement was a dark place, filled with repressed desires, childhood traumas, and sexual drives. The libido was, in its essence, sexual energy. The job was to clean this basement. But Jung, his heir apparent, his crown prince, could not stop at the basement. He felt there was something beneath it, and it was this intuition that caused the rupture. Jung looked at Freud's missiles and saw not just sexual desire, but vital energy, the elan vital, the pure creative force that moves the universe, the same force that makes a flower bloom and galaxies spin. Libido was, for Jung, psychic energy itself, of which sex was only one of its many manifestations. This redefinition was the first earthquake. The second was what he found beneath the basement. Jung realized that, when analyzing the dreams and delusions of his patients, and when studying the myths and religions of ancient cultures that had never had contact, identical patterns emerged. The fear of the dragon, the image of the wise old man, the hero's journey, the symbol of the Madala. How was this possible? Jung's answer changed the world. Beneath the basement of Freud's personal unconscious, there is an ocean, a subterranean ocean that connects all of humanity. He called it the collective unconscious. This is not a mystical idea. It is a radical hypothesis. It posits that we are not born as a tabula rasa, a blank slate. We are born with psychic hardware, a psychological inheritance that contains the condensed wisdom of millions of years of human experience. We are born with the blueprints for human experience. These blueprints are the archetypes. If Freud gave us the psychology of the individual, Jung gave us the psychology of the species. This means that you, in your personal life, are not just struggling with your personal traumas. My father didn't love me. I was rejected in school. You are also struggling with the great archetypal dramas of humanity, the fight against the shadow, the search for union, animus, the battle against chaos. Jung's legacy, therefore, is that our problems are never just our own. They are echoes of an ancient story, engraved in our psychic DNA. This has two revolutionary implications. The first is terrifying. Our lives are, in large part, guided by invisible, ancient scripts that we did not write. The second is profoundly healing. You are never alone in your pain. Your suffering has a universal echo. Your dark night of the soul is the same dark night that heroes and saints have traversed for millennia. The great break with Freud was not just theoretical. It was a paradigm shift about what it means to be human. Freud saw us as victims of our personal past. Jung saw us as bearers of a collective legacy. For Freud, the goal was functioning, to be able to love and to work. For Jung, the goal was wholeness, to be able to become who you truly are, in your fullness. The collective unconscious is Jung's most profound legacy. It is the source of all great art, all religion, all innovation, and all destructive madness. The world wars, for Jung, were not just political conflicts. They were psychotic eruptions of the collective unconscious, dark archetypes, like that of the beast or the scapegoat, that took hold of entire nations. Today, we see this same eruption in extreme polarization, in online hatred, in the mass movements that sweep the world. We are being possessed by these archetypal complexes without even knowing it. Jung's legacy, therefore, is not just a map, it is a warning. A warning that if we do not become conscious of these primordial forces within us, we will become their puppets outside of us. The rupture with Freud was the price Jung paid to give us access to this ocean. He exchanged the safety of the basement for the immensity of the unknown, and in doing so, he gave us the key not only to our personal psychology, but to the destiny of our species. If the collective unconscious is the ocean, the archetypes are the powerful, invisible currents that move its waters. They are, in Jung's words, the organs of the psyche. Just as your body is born with a plan to have a heart, lungs, and a brain, your psyche is born with a plan to have the experience of the mother, the father, the hero, the shadow, the anima the inner feminine in the man, and the animus the inner masculine in the woman. These are not images, they are potentialities. They are empty energy centers waiting to be filled by our life experience. The mother archetype is filled by our real mother, but also by the earth, by nature, by the church, by anything that nurtures. And it is here that Jung's legacy becomes the most powerful and dangerous tool of the modern era. For whoever understands archetypes understands how to move the human soul. Let's dissect the main ones. First, the persona. This is your social mask. It is the I you show at work, on social media, in the family. It is your curated identity, your functional I. The problem, in modern society, is that we mistake the mask for the face. We believe we are our persona. We live to polish the avatar, and let the real being starve to death behind it. Jung's legacy is the warning. When the persona becomes everything, the self becomes nothing. Then we have the shadow. The shadow is everything we have rejected in ourselves to build our persona. It is our psychological trash, our fears, our anger, our envy, our repressed sexuality, but also, and this is crucial, our unlived potential, our repressed creativity, our unexpressed boldness, our hidden gold. The shadow is the other in us. And because we cannot see it in ourselves, we project it onto the world. The noisy neighbor, the politician we hate, the social group we despise. They are, often, just screens where we project our own unrecognized shadow. Jung's legacy here is a radical call to humility. The evil you see in the world is, in large part, a reflection of the evil you refuse to see in yourself. To integrate the shadow is not to become evil, it is to become whole. And then, the anima and animus. The anima is the soul image of the feminine in a man's unconscious. The animus is the soul image of the masculine in a woman's unconscious. They are the bridge to the collective unconscious, and they are the source of romantic projection. When a man falls in love at first sight, he is not seeing the real woman. He is projecting his anima onto her. He is seeing his own soul. The same goes for the woman and her animus. Romantic love, at the beginning, is almost always a love affair with oneself. Jung's legacy is the map to a mature relationship, the work of withdrawing these projections, seeing the partner as they truly are, and integrating the animus within oneself, instead of desperately seeking it outside. Now, put it all together. Hollywood, Netflix, advertising, marketing. What do they sell? Archetypal stories. The hero's journey which Joseph Campbell popularized, but which has deep roots in Jung, is the mold for almost every blockbuster. The hero ego meets a mentor, wise old man, fights a villain shadow, rescues the princess anima, and returns transformed individuation. Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, Harry Potter. It is the same archetypal script, retold infinitely. Why does it work? Because it doesn't speak to your conscious mind. It speaks directly to your psychic DNA. It activates the archetypes within you. Advertisers don't sell products. They sell the fulfillment of archetypal desires. They don't sell a car. They sell the explorer archetype freedom. They don't sell a perfume. They sell the lover archetype connection, mystery. Jung's legacy, therefore, is the very language of mass influence. He gave us the instruction manual for the human soul. And this manual is being used every day to make us desire, consume, vote, and dream. The only defense, to know these archetypes first, to understand your own inner script, so you can stop being an unconscious actor in someone else's script. If Jung's diagnosis for modernity is existential emptiness, the loss of meaning that comes from a life lived only on the surface, in the persona, then the cure he proposes is individuation. This is, without a doubt, the crown jewel of his legacy. It is the most misunderstood concept and the most vital. What is individuation? In simple terms, it is the process of becoming who you truly are. It is the journey to becoming an individual, not in the sense of being selfish, but in the sense of being indivisible, that is, whole. It is not self-help. It is not finding happiness in 5 steps. It is not about feeling good. It is about becoming real. It is life's masterpiece. Modern society, with its focus on conformity, external success, and social validation, is fundamentally anti-individuation. We are taught, from birth, to be like others, to fit in, to follow the herd. The ego, our conscious mind, is the agent of this conformity. It wants security, approval, and control. But in the depths of the psyche, there is another center, a larger, wiser, and older center. Jung called it the self. The self is the archetype of wholeness, the God within. It is the ordering center of the entire psyche, including the conscious and the unconscious. The ego, in Jung's view, should be merely the servant of the self. But in our lives, the ego has become the tyrant king. Individuation is the process of dethroning the ego and putting it in its proper place, in service of wholeness, the self. This journey, Jung warns, is not pretty. It doesn't happen by reading inspiring books. It begins with collapse. It begins when the life you built with your ego, your career, your relationship, your identity falls apart. It is the dark night of the soul. It is the moment you realize that everything you fought for is meaningless. It is at this point of despair that the self begins to call. The process of individuation requires, first, the confrontation with the shadow. You cannot become whole if you do not look at what you have rejected. You must have the courage to say, I am this, but I am also that. I am kind, but I am also capable of cruelty. I am generous, but I am also envious. It is an act of radical psychological honesty. Next comes the confrontation with the anima, animus. It is the process of stopping the search for your other half in someone else and beginning to develop that internal energy. For a man, it is cultivating his capacity to feel, to relate, to intuit anima. For a woman, it is cultivating her capacity to think logically, to act in the world, to have clarity, animus. It is the inner alchemical marriage. Jung's legacy here is profound. The modern existential void is the cry of the self. For us to begin this journey, depression is not just a chemical imbalance. It is a sign that we are living the wrong life, the life of the ego, and not the life of the soul. Modern coaches have taken individuation and diluted it, turning it into being your best version or reaching your maximum potential. But this is still the language of the ego, the language of performance. Jungian individuation is deeper. It is about accepting all your versions, including the worst ones. It is about finding purpose not in success, but in meaning. Jung's legacy is the inner compass. The self communicates with us through dreams, synchronicities, and intuitions. It is constantly trying to guide us back to our true path. But in our noisy society, we do not hear it. Individuation is the act of learning to listen to the silence again. It is the forgotten antidote to modern chaos. It is not a journey for everyone. It is a journey for those who no longer have a choice, for those whose pain of remaining the same has become greater than the fear of change. It is the answer to the question, why am I here? And Jung's answer is, you are here to become yourself, fully. To the modern man, the dream is a trivial byproduct of the brain. It is the day's neurological trash, a random hiccup of the saps. To Freud, the dream was a censor. It was a disguise for repressed desires, primarily sexual. The dream was something to be deciphered, like an enemy code, to reveal a dirty secret. But for Carl Jung, the dream was something entirely different. His legacy, here, is the rehabilitation of the dream as the most honest, wise, and crucial language of the psyche. For Jung, the dream is not trying to hide something. It is trying to reveal something. The dream is not a censor, it is a messenger. And the messenger is the self. The dream is, literally, a letter from the wisest center of your psyche to your confused and limited ego. It is the soul's GPS. The main function of the dream, in Jung's view, is compensation. Conscious life is, by nature, one-sided. If you are very rational during the day, your dreams will be very emotional at night. If you are overly nice and passive, your persona, your dreams might be full of anger and violence, your shadow. The dream is always trying to restore balance. It is showing the ego what it is ignoring, what it is repressing, what it refuses to see. Jung's legacy is that we must take our dreams seriously, not literally, but symbolically. And here is another crucial break with Freud. For Freud, a symbol was a sign, a cigar is a penis. It had a direct translation. For Jung, a symbol is a symbol. It is the best possible representation of something that is, ultimately, unknown. A symbol cannot be reduced to a single thing. The symbol of water in a dream. What does it mean? For Freud, probably birth. For Jung, well, it depends. Is it dirty or clean water? Is it an ocean or a puddle? Are you drowning in it or drinking from it? Water can be the unconscious emotion, the feminine purification chaos. The dream speaks in metaphors. Jung's legacy is that he taught us to amplify the dream's symbols rather than reduce them. If you dream of a key, Jung would ask, what is a key to you? Personal association. And what does the key mean in mythology, in religion, in fairy tales? Archetypal amplification. Does the key open lock? Is it gold? Is it iron? The answer is not in a dream dictionary. It is in the dialogue between the dreamer and the symbol. Archetypal dreams are another pillar of his legacy. These are the big dreams, the ones you never forget, that feel more real than reality itself. Dreaming of flying, falling, being chased by a dark figure, meeting a wise old man, discovering a treasure. These, Jung said, come directly from the collective unconscious. They are not about your yesterday. They are about your life's journey. They are milestones of your individuation. The exam dream you have, even decades after leaving school. For Jung, it is the self saying, you are being tested. Are you prepared for the next level of your life? The dream of being chased. It is your shadow, begging you to stop running and turn to face it. In modern psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy might see the dream as irrelevant, but Jung's legacy insists that ignoring your dreams is like driving in a foreign country at night, without lights and throwing the GPS out the window. You are ignoring the only source of guidance you possess. The dream is the voice of nature within us. It is the inner shaman, the healer, the guide. It reminds us that we are not the masters in our own house. The ego is just a visitor in a vast palace. The dream is the voice of the palace's owner. Learning to hear that voice is, perhaps, the most essential skill for psychological survival in a world that only teaches us to shout. How did Jung's legacy change what happens inside the therapy room? The answer is, it changed everything. Before him, and largely with Freud, therapy was a medical model. The patient was sick, the doctor was sane. The patient lay on the couch, back to the analyst, who was a blank screen, a neutral mirror. Jung destroyed this hierarchy. For him, therapy was not a medical procedure, it was a human encounter. He abandoned the couch and set up to chairs, face to face. The patient and the analyst were not sick and sane. They were two imperfect human beings on a mutual journey of discovery. Jung famously said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The therapist is not immune to the process. He is also in analysis. This was the first radical legacy, therapy as a relationship. The second was the purpose of therapy. For Freud, therapy was archaeological, digging into the past to find the cause of the problem, childhood trauma. For Jung, therapy was also teleological, looking at the purpose of the symptom. The question was not just, what caused this depression? The question was, where is this depression trying to lead me? What does it want me to change? What part of my life is not being lived? The symptom, for Jung, was not just an enemy to be eliminated. It was a messenger from the self. Neurosis was suffering with a purpose, trying to force the individual out of a one-sided life and move them toward wholeness. This changes the goal of healing. Healing is not getting back to normal, as normal might be the illness itself. Healing is advancing to a new level of consciousness. Beyond talk, Jung introduced the creative into therapy. He understood that the unconscious does not speak only in words, it speaks in images. Thus, his legacy includes tools like art therapy. He encouraged his patients and himself to draw, paint, or sculpt their dreams and emotions. The act of giving concrete form to an inner image is, in itself, an act of integration. Active imagination, another of his techniques, is a conscious dialogue with the figures of the unconscious. Instead of just analyzing a dream figure like the shadow, you invite it to talk, as if it were real. You ask, what do you want from me? It is a profound method of direct engagement with the psyche. Perhaps the most emblematic tool is sandplay therapy. Developed by Dora Kalf based directly on Jung's principles, the patient often, but not only, children uses a sandbox and a collection of miniatures, people, animals, monsters, buildings to create a world. This world is an instant, three-dimensional portrait of the state of the patient's psyche. It is the unconscious speaking in pure symbols. Jung's legacy to psychotherapy is that he transformed it from a reductionist science into an alchemical art. The therapy room became a vessel of vas alchemicum, where the raw elements of the patient's psyche, the lead, are cooked in the fire of the therapeutic relationship until they can be transformed into gold, the integrated self. Jung saw the therapist less as a doctor and more as a guide, a psychopomp guide of souls, who had already walked through the darkness and could now hold a lantern for the other. In the modern world, where therapy is being rapidly reduced to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy manuals, and medication prescriptions focusing only on symptoms, Jung's legacy is a vital reminder. You cannot fix a soul. You can only create the conditions for it to grow, and that condition is an authentic, courageous, and deep human relationship. This is, perhaps, Jung's most controversial and revolutionary concept, the one that took him beyond the borders of psychology and placed him in direct dialogue with quantum physics. It is the legacy that challenges our very notion of reality. We are used to thinking of the world in terms of causality. A causes B. The billiard ball hits another and makes it move. You study cause and you pass the test effect. This is the pillar of Western scientific thought. But Jung observed, in his practice and in his life, another principle at work, a principle he called synchronicity. He defined it as a causal connecting principle. It is the simultaneous occurrence of two events: a psychic event, a thought, a dream, a feeling, and an external event, something that happens in the world. They have no causal relationship, but whose coincidence is meaningful to the person experiencing it. Jung's classic example: he was treating a hyperrational patient who resisted any idea of the unconscious. She was telling him about a dream she had of a golden scarab. At that exact moment, something gently tapped on the consulting room window. Jung opened it. It was a beetle, the closest thing to a golden scarab that existed in that region of Switzerland. He caught it and said to the patient, "Here is your scarab." That moment broke her rational resistance, and the therapy could move forward. The dream internal event did not cause the beetle, nor did the beetle cause the dream, but their coincidence was loaded with meaning. Jung's legacy, here, is the validation of those experiences we all have, but which science dismisses as mere coincidence. Thinking of someone you haven't seen in 20 years, and the phone rings 5 seconds later, and it's that person. Opening a book at random and finding the exact answer to a question that torments you. Synchronicity is the universe winking at you. It is evidence that there is an underlying order, a connection between your psyche, your inner world, and matter, the outer world. Jung was not alone in this. He developed this idea in intense correspondence with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, one of the fathers of quantum physics. Pauli was fascinated by the fact that, at the subatomic level, the universe did not seem to operate by strict causality, but by probabilities and the eye of the observer. Together, they postulated the unused mundus one world, the idea that, at a deeper level, psyche and matter are not two separate things, but two faces of the same reality. Synchronicity is a momentary tear in the veil, where we can glimpse this fundamental unity. What does this mean for modern man? It means we are not isolated in our minds. We are in a constant dialogue with reality. The world out there is not a dead, mechanical backdrop. It is a living mirror of our state in here. When you are aligned with yourself, with your journey of individuation, synchronicities tend to increase. It is as if the universe begins to conspire in your favor, placing the right people, the right books, and the right opportunities in your path. It is not magic in the sense of The Secret, where you attract things with positive thinking. It is more subtle. It is the recognition that, when you are on your path, the world resonates with you. The legacy of synchronicity is the end of meaningless chance. It is the suggestion that meaning is not something we create from scratch, but something we discover in the interaction between our soul and the world. For an era suffering from a sense of alienation and meaninglessness, synchronicity is the promise that we are not alone and that our lives matter within an intelligent, interconnected cosmos. It is the physics of the soul. In an era dominated by scientific materialism on one side and religious dogmatism on the other, Jung offered a third path. His most controversial and, perhaps, most necessary legacy is the rescue of spirituality as a fundamental psychological function. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, He was describing the collapse of the collective image of God that had sustained Western civilization for millennia. The result of this collapse, Jung predicted, would be a psychological catastrophe. Not because Jung was a priest or a theologian, he always insisted he was a psychologist, an empirical scientist, but because he observed that the human psyche has an innate religious function. We have a psychological need as fundamental to experience the sacred, the numinous. As he called it, as we have to eat or to relate. The numinous is the overwhelming experience of awe, mystery, and reverence in the face of something wholly other, something greater than our small ego. For Jung, the crucial question was not whether God exists, a theological question, which he left to others, but that the archetype of God undeniably exists within the human psyche. It is the archetype of wholeness, of order, and of ultimate meaning. It is, in psychological terms, synonymous with the self. Religions, for Jung, were elaborate psychotherapeutic systems, created by the collective unconscious over millennia to contain and channel this powerful numinous energy. The rituals, the myths, the dogmas, were defenses against the terrifying, direct power of the sacred. The problem of modern man, Jung said, is that in discarding religion often for good reasons, because of its rigidity and corruption, he threw the baby out with the bathwater. He lost the container for the experience of the numinous. And what happens when this fundamental psychological energy has nowhere to go? It doesn't disappear. It simply projects itself onto inadequate substitutes. If you do not worship God, you will worship something else. Jung's legacy is the diagnosis of our age. The mass neuroses of the 20th century, communism, fascism, were psychological epidemics, where the archetype of God was projected onto charismatic leaders or the state. Today, this energy is projected onto money, fame, power, science, scientism, consumerism, or polarized political ideologies. The people fighting fanatically on social media over politics are not having a rational debate. They are often in an unconscious holy war, defending their substitute God. Jung's legacy is a stark warning. A life without connection to the numinous, without a sense of greater meaning, is a psychologically unhealthy life. It leads to addiction, depression, and tyranny. What Jung proposed was not a return to dogmatic religion, but a return to the individual spiritual experience. Individuation is the spiritual journey. It is finding the God within the self instead of looking for it only outside. It is having your own direct experience of the sacred, whether through dream analysis, art, meditation, contact with nature, or deep relationship. He rehabilitated spirituality for the skeptical, intellectual person. He showed that you do not need to commit intellectual suicide to have a rich spiritual life. On the contrary, the spiritual journey is the highest form of psychological development. In a world divided between an empty atheism and a blind fundamentalism, Jung's legacy is the bridge. He is the patron saint of the spiritual but not religious. He gave us permission to take our soul seriously again, not as a dogma, but as the central empirical fact of our lives. If you want to see Carl Jung's legacy in action, don't go to a library. Go to the movies, or turn on Netflix, or play a video game. The most visible and omnipresent impact of Jung on the modern world is in how we tell stories. As we explored in Topic 3, archetypes are the DNA of the soul. And the stories that resonate, the ones that last, the ones that generate billions of dollars, are those that activate this DNA. Jung's work was the foundation for the work of Joseph Campbell and his famous hero's journey, the hero with 1,000 faces. Campbell, in turn, became the unofficial mentor of Hollywood. George Lucas explicitly used Campbell's hero's journey, and therefore, Jung's archetypes to write Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is the reluctant hero. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the wise old man, the mentor. Darth Vader is the shadow, literally, the dark father. The Force is the collective unconscious or the self, the field that connects everything. Princess Leia is the anima, the soul's objective, the inspiration. The Death Star is the great evil to be confronted. The story works not because it has spaceships, but because it is a perfectly executed Jungian myth. Let's take the Matrix. Neo is the hero in a false world, the persona. Morpheus is the mentor, wise old man who offers the pill of truth. Agent Smith is the shadow, the part of the system that refuses to change, the guardian of the threshold. Trinity is the anima who literally resurrects him with love. The matrix itself is the world of the ego's illusion, and Zion is the real world of the self. It is pure Jungian psychology disguised as science fiction. This legacy goes further. Any superhero story, the hero discovers their powers, connects to the self, fights a villain who is their dark reflection, the shadow, like Batman and Joker, and saves the city, restores the balance of the psyche. In Harry Potter, Voldemort is the archetypal shadow, the part of the soul that was split off. Dumbledore is the wise old man. Harry's journey is a long process of individuation, of integrating the part of Voldemort that lives inside him. Jung's legacy is so deep that even modern villains have become Jungian. Complex villains like Thanos in Avengers or the Joker himself in the 2019 film are not just evil. They are tragic figures, possessed by an archetype or an idea, often a shadow that society created and rejected. What does this mean? It means that pop culture has become our primary mythology delivery system. In a secular age, as we saw in Topic 8, where the myths of religion have lost their power, Hollywood has taken on the role of telling us the archetypal stories our soul needs to navigate life. We no longer have rites of passage, we have coming-of-age films. We no longer have stories of saints, we have stories of superheroes. Jung's legacy is that he provided the master script for this entire industry. Screenwriters, directors, and producers use these structures consciously or unconsciously because they work. They strike the deep chords of our collective unconscious. And for us, as consumers, understanding Jung gives us X-ray vision. It allows us to see through the plot and understand why we are being so affected. It allows us to use films not just as entertainment, but as mirrors for our own journey. Ah, that villain irritates me. What part of my shadow does he represent? Why do I identify so much with this heroine? What part of myself is she trying to awaken? Jung's legacy, in pop culture, is proof that he was not inventing theories. He was describing the reality of the psyche. We have reached the end of this map, but not the end of the journey. The journey never ends. The final legacy of Carl Jung is not a set of theories in a book. It is not an entry in Wikipedia. It is not even the influence he has on therapy or in Hollywood. The true, living legacy of Carl Jung is you. It is the individual who, having heard this call, now has a choice. You can no longer unsee the architecture. You can no longer pretend that coincidence is just coincidence. You can no longer pretend that your dreams are trash. You can no longer pretend that the politician you hate is just evil out there. You have been confronted with the map. Jung's legacy is, in essence, an invitation. A dangerous invitation, yes. An invitation to the most difficult journey a human being can undertake. The journey inward, the journey of individuation. We saw that the modern world is sick, starved for meaning amidst the noise. Topic 1. We saw that Jung broke with Freud to give us the map of an ocean that connects us all. Topic 2. We saw that this ocean is moved by powerful currents, the archetypes, which the media uses to shape us. Topic 3. And we saw that the only cure for the emptiness is the journey to the self, individuation. Topic 4. He gave us back the language of dreams as the soul's GPS. Topic 5. He transformed therapy into an alchemical encounter. Topic 6. He showed us that the universe dialogues with us through synchronicity. Topic 7. He rescued the sacred from the prison of dogma, making spirituality a psychological necessity. Topic 8. And he showed us how his work is alive, pulsating as the hidden heart of our culture. Topic 9. And now, all of this converges on a single point. The point where you stand right now. Jung's legacy is not history. It is a task. It is our task. Jung said that the world would not be saved by mass movements or grand ideologies. He saw what they did in World War II. He said the world only has one chance of salvation, the transformation of consciousness, one individual at a time. The work of integrating one's own shadow, of becoming conscious, is not an act of selfish self-help. It is the most radical political, social, and spiritual act that exists. Every piece of shadow you integrate in yourself is one less piece of darkness you will project onto the world. Every step you take toward your own wholeness is a step toward the healing of the collective. Jung's legacy is the ultimate responsibility. He placed the fate of the world not in the hands of a government or an external god, but in yours. in your courage to look in the mirror, in your willingness to do the hard work, in your audacity to become who you truly are. The echo we heard at the beginning was not just from Jung. It was the echo of your own self, calling you home. The journey is charted. The compass is in your hands. The final question that Jung's legacy leaves us is devastatingly simple. Do you have the courage to begin?